When you have a cigarette, what you do is you set the tobacco on fire, and that generates an aerosol of ultrafine particles and nicotine that carries the nicotine deep into your lungs. It's absorbed, it goes to your left heart and to your brain within a few seconds, and you get a big nicotine blast. The way an e-cigarette works is you have a liquid that contains propylene glycol, nicotine, flavorants, and that's absorbed onto a wick, and then you have a coil wrapped around the wick, and you turn the coil on and heat it up like a toaster coil, except smaller, and that generates an aerosol of ultrafine particles that carries the nicotine deep into your lungs. The way that an e-cigarette delivers nicotine and the way that a cigarette delivers nicotine is fundamentally the same.
Newport tastes fresher, tastes better too.
LSMFT. Lucky Strike means fine tobacco.
Come to where the flavor is.
Why don't you pick me up and smoke me sometime?
Well, I was sitting in my office in the hospital at about 11 o'clock in the morning. A box arrived, 1994, May 12th, 1994. And I opened it up, and there was several thousand pages of secret internal tobacco industry documents. I had been battling the tobacco industry for years by then. And one thing that always struck me was how stupid the statements they would make publicly were. They would say, nicotine isn't addictive, we don't market to kids, we don't know if smoking causes disease.
Cool, snow fresh, cool, taste so clean, so refreshing.
Low in tar and nicotine. Real tobacco taste.
But these internal documents were high-level correspondence between the CEOs, their top management, their board, their top scientists, their PR people, their lawyers. And they were speaking very frankly about the risks of smoking, nicotine addiction. Probably the most quoted line in the documents was from 1963 when the general counsel for Brown & Williamson Tobacco, where he said, we're in the business of selling nicotine, an addictive drug.
I think the perception is that there's sort of this harmless flavored juice that people are inhaling, and it's not just the nicotine, there's the propellants and things in the juice that allow the person to get it aerosolized and breathe it in. The other things that surprised me about vaping, really it's the proportion of teenagers that are doing it. That shocked me. I've even talked with some juniors and seniors in high school who say that they don't know a single person that doesn't. By 8th grade, it's now the cool thing to do, so we're seeing it going younger and younger.
It's important to note that the FDA has been concerned about this to the point of labeling vaping as an official epidemic in kids. So it's not just a bunch of, docs who are saying, I'm worried about this. Now the FDA has seen such a rise in teen vaping that they've labeled it as an epidemic.
I think that with the skyrocketing number of youth who are using e-cigarettes, it doesn't bode well for the future.
There's this idea out there that vaping was started as a healthier alternative to smoking. Tobacco is awful in so many ways, but how do we really know what vaping does to the body? It's been around since 2006. How long was tobacco around? And we've had a long time to study its effect on the body. Vaping has been around for 10 years, 12 years. So how can we really say convincingly that vaping is so much better than tobacco smoke?
And it wasn't until 1988 that the Surgeon General said nicotine is an addictive drug. So while the tobacco industry had this whole public scientific PR campaign running to try to question, or to challenge the evidence that nicotine was addictive, for example. They were using their very sophisticated understanding of nicotine addiction and nicotine pharmacology to design products that were as addictive as possible so they could maximize sales and profits.
What's really concerning is that just recently, Altria, the largest tobacco company in the US, the ones who make Marlboro, bought 35% of Juul. So they invested $12.8 billion in cash, plus $2 billion in bonuses to acquire a third of Juul. E-cigarettes typically deliver nicotine, and youth nicotine exposure can cause addiction and harm the developing brain.
I think one of the things that's tough about this is you might not even know if your kid is vaping. So back in the old school days, using a classic Marlboro cigarette, you can smell it for a mile, right? And really no amount of cologne and mouthwash can disguise that. But with this vaping, some of the vaping aerosols are odorless, and some smell like sort of benign things, pineapple. Some of the vaping devices don't even look like cigarettes. They might look like a USB stick. They might look like a little metal canister. You wouldn't even know that it's a vaping device.
If you look at total tobacco product use among kids, it's up above where it was 5 or 10 years ago.
So the United States Surgeon General came out with a report, and the National Academies of Sciences came out with a report, both independently, showing that kids who vape go on to use regular tobacco cigarettes at much higher rates than kids who don't vape.
Kids who we would have thought would have been protected from smoking based on their demographics, their social standing, their academic prowess, those kids are more likely to use e-cigarettes and progress on to combusted cigarettes.
The tobacco companies have shifted people over from cigarettes to e-cigarettes.
I think that the real danger of vaping is that we are addicting a new generation of kids to nicotine. And we know of the dangers of nicotine and of tobacco. We know it. And we should have been on top of this and doing things to protect kids.
I mean, I almost think like a blue or a purple, and then we could see what it prints like and see if it makes a difference. Well, this class is our applied digital design class, and they've been working on creating anti-vaping posters. They did some research, they got online. I had a few websites that I suggested they take a look at.
We've been working on this for about a month now, I would say. We started out researching different facts and statistics about vaping.
Go up to the Finder, go to Preferences. It reminded me of big tobacco and just that real push to get young people hooked early. That somehow the water vapor was healthier and it wasn't as damaging to your lungs and things like that. And I think that's how it's been portrayed or presented. And it seems like that's not actually the truth.
Okay. Is everybody ready? Dave, are you ready? Good. Hang on, stand by, here we go. 11:15:30.
The smoke produced by e-cigarettes
Is not
water vapor.
and it isn't harmless.
The two primary ingredients found in e-cigarettes are
Propylene
Propylene glycol.
and vegetable glycerin.
Both chemicals are toxic
Toxic to your cells.
Okay, perfect, that's good, you're done. Thank you, excellent.
Now that I've looked at everything, I would tell my friends that it's really not good for you, and despite what all of the big brands say, it's not safer than smoking cigarettes.
There's been several studies where kids actually don't know if the products have nicotine in them or not. For example, All Juuls have nicotine, but a lot of kids think they're just using mango or whatever the flavor happens to be.
I was surprised to learn that there's 20 cigarettes is equivalent to 1 Juul pod. You're basically smoking an entire pack of cigarettes with just 1 Juul pod.
What's well known from the last 50 or 60 years is that you can get addicted to cigarettes in as few as 100 cigarettes. So a teenager starting smoking, it only takes about 100 cigarettes to get a permanent addiction, and that's actually the equivalent of about 5 Juul pods. So it's not very many pods to get to a full-blown addiction in nicotine.
These pods are different from vape mods. They're not filled with e-juice, they're filled with nicotine salt, which is why this is so much smaller than a mod, which you'd fill up all the way with a big old thing.
One of the big innovations in Juul is they use a nicotine salt rather than freebase nicotine, and that allows people to inhale much higher doses. If you are inhaling the same dose of nicotine from a cigarette as Juul delivers on a puff, you would probably gag. But because the nicotine is in a different chemical form, you can breathe it in.
I learned that nicotine is as addictive as cocaine and heroin.
Nicotine is the most addictive substance we know. I have patients who have quit everything else, cocaine, heroin, meth, haven't been able to quit smoking.
The way nicotine works is that it mimics the chemical your nerve cells communicate with each other with.
In smoking, some of the nicotine enters the body. When we light a cigarette, only some 15%, a total quantity of nicotine, enters the mouth.
When you put nicotine in your body, it binds to the acetylcholine receptor sites and stimulates them. And that's why people get a buzz when they use nicotine. It's stimulating their nervous system.
Carried by the blood, nicotine reaches the nerve cells, where it induces a complex set of reactions. The drug acts mainly on 3 parts of the nervous system: on the ganglia, or switchboards, of the autonomic nervous system, on the junction between nerves and the muscle, and on the brain itself.
So teenagers, and a lot of times these are middle schoolers and high schoolers who are vaping, could be as young as 12, 13, they still have a lot of brain development to go. And so what we know is that if your brain is insulted for any reason, and insulted, I mean if your brain is harmed for any reason during critical periods of development, it can cause a lot of long-term effects.
When you are using nicotine, especially if you're a kid when your brain is still developing, and you start screwing with the communication between nerves, your nerve cells say, oh, something is amok.
Adolescent use of nicotine can harm brain areas that control attention, learning, mood, and impulse control.
What we've seen with cigarettes is when people try to quit, they have to try over and over again before they succeed. And we're actually finding the same thing is true with vaping products. People want to quit, but they start going into that nicotine withdrawal. They start feeling shaky, they start feeling that urge, and pretty soon they're vaping again.
This is a problem for everybody, but it's particularly a problem for kids, because your brain is still developing up until about age 26. And by bathing it in nicotine, in this kind of faux neurotransmitter, you're getting it all confused, and so the way your brain develops is different.
So teenagers and even younger teens and adolescents and older, 5th, 6th graders who aren't teenagers yet, their brains are really primed for addiction, and the patterns that they establish during that developmental stage tend to get really deeply ingrained in their brain. So when a teenager starts smoking, it's much harder for them to quit than when a 20 or 30-year-old starts smoking.
I started around the age of 15, smoking cigarettes.
I started smoking cigarettes in 6th grade.
And the same appears to be true for vaping products. So when somebody starts vaping when they're 13, 15, 17, in that window, they more quickly appear to get addicted to the nicotine.
You can really notice when that kind of sets on because it goes from like, oh, my friends are smoking, I'll smoke with them, or I'll just have a quick cigarette, to even when you are not in the mood for a cigarette, being like, well, I need to have a cigarette.
I vape 24/7, so like I wake up, just start vaping, you know, as I'm driving, I'm vaping. I just vape whenever I'm able to.
So my plan was never to completely go off nicotine because I like it, but I was able to be like, oh, I'm gonna go down to 3 milligrams versus a cigarette, which I believe is around 12 milligrams. With these little vape pens and stuff, you can't control it, it's all the same. And they don't advertise on the packaging how much that is. So I don't know how much I'm consuming.
There have been many studies where people go out and look at the actual, you know, they get some e-liquid from different products and then they go put it in a mass spectrometer, and a very substantial fraction of the ones that say they don't have nicotine in them have nicotine in them. The first thing you gotta know is just because something says it doesn't have any nicotine doesn't mean it doesn't have any nicotine. And the quality control in these products is terrible.
One thing that's very important to remember is that there are all kinds of toxic chemicals that can be in this aerosol.
Vape liquid without nicotine does contain
Acrolein.
acrolein,
Which could damage your lungs.
Diethylene glycol.
an ingredient in antifreeze.
One study found
That with vaping
Exposure to formaldehyde
is 5 to 15 times greater
than from smoking cigarettes.
e-cigs produce dangerous chemicals.
acetaldehyde,
Acetaldehyde. Acrolein.
acrolein, and formaldehyde.
These aldehydes
Can cause lung disease.
Juul costs less per nicotine content than cigarettes. So these are the little pods. So one of those has as much nicotine as a pack of cigarettes. So the retail price of a package of 4 cartridges of Juul is about $15. For the same nicotine content in a pack of cigarettes, retail price is $32. So it makes it easier for people who don't have as much money, or kids, to buy Juul.
So in the morning, I mean, the first thing I do is I get up, go make, put the coffee on. I put my e-cigarette to charge. I get in the car, I take a couple of vapes. I do about 2 or 3 puffs, or whatever out of the vape cigarette. And then I drive into work, and then probably when I'm getting close into work, I'll take a couple more puffs, And then I turn it off and leave it in the car until I'm done for the day. So, and then when I'm on my way back home, I'll do the same thing. I started smoking when I was a teenager. So back in 17, 18 years old, I started smoking. It was a cool thing to do back in the 80s.
Vaping is cool. Yeah.
Well, I was a smoker for 35 years. Tried lots of various methods to try to quit smoking, and nothing really was effective. I tried the patches, I had tried the gum, and nothing was really effective. So my son bought me an e-cigarette probably a couple years ago. I started off with a nicotine level of I think it was about 15 milligrams per bottle. And I incrementally went down until I got to a 0 nicotine level. And so now I have it. I use it just on occasion. I don't use it all the time. So I've weaned myself basically off the nicotine. I used flavored nicotine, the juice. They tasted sweet, they tasted pretty good. I did notice also in the car or around anybody, your clothes after you've smoked a cigarette, that smell lingers on with you. You don't have that effect with the vape either.
E-cigs may smell better than regular smoking.
So you might think it's okay to be around others while you do it.
The U.S. Surgeon General says
There are health risks of secondhand e-cig emissions. Nicotine.
Nicotine.
Ultrafine particles.
Volatile organic compounds.
Like benzene.
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 Which is found in car exhaust.
And heavy metals.
Like nickel, tin,
And lead.
All these in secondhand e-cig emissions.
Ultimately, nothing is good for you. I don't know all of the ingredients that they do use for the vape, but my theory or my belief is that it's less impactful, than real cigarettes.
It is true that cigarettes probably generate a lot more cancer-causing chemicals than e-cigarettes do. At least for the chemicals people have looked at, that seems to be the case. But they still are generating those ultrafine particles, and those particles are themselves dangerous. They're very, very small. They're a 50th or 100th the size of a human hair. And they go right into people's blood, right into the cells in their body. They trigger inflammatory processes and other things, and they increase the risk of having a heart attack, of having lung problems.
So when the e-juice in the vape is heated, which is how all of these work in order to make that vapor, when these substances are heated, it creates a chemical reaction that makes formaldehyde, and it gets then breathed deeply into the lungs, which can cause, we think, long-term lung damage.
E-cigs deliver lower levels of carcinogens.
than traditional cigarettes. But e-cigs still expose you to high levels
of ultrafine
particles
And other toxins.
That increase
cardiovascular and lung disease risk.
They affect your teeth too.
Hi, Priscilla. Hi. It's nice to see you. I'm going to lean you back and take a peek, okay? Well, the concern with vaping is that vaping delivers nicotine. So the effect of nicotine is the same, essentially, as smoking or smokeless tobacco on the health of the gum tissue, because it decreases the blood supply to the tissue and increases your risk for gum disease. What we have come to learn about vaping is that the carrier is propylene glycol, and when that is broken down through the vaping process, the byproducts, some of them which are acidic, tend to dry the mouth tissues, leading to dry mouth, which increases your risk for tooth decay. The other portion of the e-liquid is vegetable glycerin, which when it's broken down by itself doesn't have any effect on the oral tissues. When you add the flavoring agent to the vegetable glycerin, it softens the enamel by about 27%, which increases your risk for tooth decay.
And so what we know is that vaping in and of itself is bad for your teeth. Any form of nicotine decreases blood flow to the gums, which causes tooth decay, causes bacterial overgrowth, persistent bad breath, and who would want to date you if your teeth are falling out and you have bad breath?
They're doing it because they get a buzz, because they think it makes them look grown up, because it's a social thing with their friends, because they've been sucked into all the imagery that the tobacco companies have put in front of them, because they've seen all the smoking in movies that the tobacco companies historically got placed. But they all think they're going to quit when they're around 21 or 22. But then when they get there, they're addicted. The flavorants, which are used in much higher levels in e-cigarettes than in cigarettes, are themselves quite dangerous in terms of affecting people's lungs and their cardiovascular system. And things which would be perfectly fine to eat, something like butter flavoring from butter flavored popcorn, or cinnamon oil. When you eat it, it's fine. But if you take those oils and aerosolize them and inhale them, they really tear up your lungs.
Yeah, it is. I do enjoy vaping. It tastes good, it smells good. I don't know, I like making clouds and stuff like that. There's many, many, many different flavors of juice. So the one I'm vaping right now, it's my favorite. It's called Galaxy. Basically, it's strawberry, banana, and whipped cream. It's not too strong either, so it's pretty good. I really like probably the fruity flavors or like a mint one.
Since smoking's not a natural behavior like eating or drinking, the manufacturers commonly add flavoring. Flavoring especially enhances the appeal to first-time users, especially teens.
I think it could be attractive just because of the flavor, because, oh, it tastes good, like candy. You want candy because it tastes good.
Certain vaping aerosolized flavors, they prevent nitric oxide from being released in the cardiac endothelial cell. So what does that mean? Nitric oxide is a compound that relaxes your arteries. It keeps them nice and open. It prevents them from being clogged. And so some vaping aerosols have been linked with decreased nitric oxide production, meaning that this very valuable thing that dilates your arteries isn't available. So you may be more likely to have narrower arteries, which are more likely to get clogged and plaques, and eventually could cause a heart attack.
My favorite one was the Red Bull or the Pina Colada. Those are the two favorites.
I'm the, well, kind of like the night cook dude over here. I run the ship at night. When I started smoking cigarettes, I was like 15, 16-ish. At first, I don't know, I just did it at school one time, and I shouldn't have done that. Just because it was kind of just downhill, and I just got it, because unfortunately my dad, he's the same way. He's like, cigarettes are like his thing. It snagged him up real quick, so kind of did the same thing with me. The reason why I kind of started vaping lately is because I've been trying to get into shape and stuff like that, and smoking cigarettes, like, just, you can't run, you can't do anything without hacking up a lung and stuff like that. So sometimes you go and you buy the juice, and it came with two different ones. The other one was a blueberry one, and this is like strawberry jam on like buttered toast is what it says. I like it a lot. It's like breakfast. It's like I maybe go outside like maybe 2 or 3 times a night for like 5 minutes and just vape outside for a couple minutes and then go back inside. And then that's it. If I had to do it over again, I definitely would not ever smoke cigarettes. It's just waste of my time and my energy and health.
You can also manipulate the nicotine delivery and absorption by things like varying the acidity of the smoke or the liquid, varying the presence of other chemicals that interact with the nicotine, like acetaldehyde, which is produced when you burn sugar, or menthol, which is in many cigarettes, especially cigarettes used by kids, and the menthol e-cigarettes. And the menthol is a local anesthetic.
Beginners, almost without exception, find smoking irritating. Sometimes reactions are quite violent. And yet, smoking is a widespread social habit.
Enough menthol to keep the taste cool and fresh.
Menthol deadens your throat, makes it easier to inhale. And it also seems to interact with the nicotine in ways that where you get a bigger hit for the same level of exposure.
It's called, I don't know, just a mod. Basically, this is the tank, and then this is like the mod. It's controlled with 2 batteries, and then you change the coils out as you use it, and then you just fill the juice in here.
There's just so much that goes into smoking a mod, knowing the amperage and wattage of everything, being able to get the right pieces and parts together. That was just kind of annoying.
So I went and I bought It's a Snow Wolf. I used to have the atomizer part for it too. It's the top part, this part, but it was kind of like acting up, so I got a new one.
There's conclusive evidence that e-cigarette products contain and emit numerous potentially toxic substances, and they contain more metals than combusted cigarettes, and that probably is from the heating of the coil and the other components of the devices.
Okay, so this is a sub-VOD. It's a Kangertech sub-VOD. That's the design. So again, I like it because it's the pen. It's not, I know they have other devices, that are a lot bigger, but this is, small, doesn't, it's a little bit more feminine, I think.
You purchase this part, which is the actual pen. They run for about $20, and then once you buy it, it's yours. And it comes with a charger, charges really quickly, and then what you refill are these little pods, and you buy them in packs of 2 for about $9.
So there's a few different ways you could vape it. You could do wattage, temperature, wattage, temperature, and I don't know, there's another one, but I use wattage.
There is a button right here to turn it on or off. You click it 5 times. So I just turned it off. So to turn it on, I'm going to click it 5 times, and then you'll see it blinking. And you'll know that it's on when you press the button, it blinks.
I think what it is just that, like, they look cool. It's just like the mods just look fancy. They look cool. They have like lights, so it's like, ooh, pretty shiny. Like you see something and it's like, oh, that's cool. I want it just to have it.
The other concern is that many people are using the e-cigarette devices with cannabis. It's also shown that kids who start vaping are more likely to go on to use marijuana.
What a lot of people are doing is going out and buying e-juice and vaporizing pen and putting them together. And you can put anything you want in e-juice. So people put THC products, so marijuana products can be dissolved in this e-juice, and then they can smoke or vape marijuana throughout the school day, throughout their home life, without there being that classic marijuana odor.
I've seen actually as high as 1 in 3 kids are using their e-cigarette for some device other than the aerosol intended for it. And so some of that could be marijuana. And the highly concentrated form of THC, the wax, which is being melted into a liquid form and then being inhaled through these cigarettes, is way, way, way more concentrated than any marijuana was, in the 60s, 70s, 80s.
This is live resin. What it is the plant is cut, and the day it is cut, it is frozen immediately and ran within 24 hours of its new life. So what that does to the THC levels, it just concentrates it from the actual flower. On average, our flower in-house tests anywhere from 20% THC to 25%. What that does is then breaks it down to about 75 to 85% when we extract all the THC and terpenes off the product. So basically just concentrating it from that flower, taking all the THC and terpenes off of the plant, and creating a very, very high intoxicating product.
A recent survey actually found that about 9% of high schoolers had used a vaporizing pen to inhale a marijuana product.
Altria also bought 45% of the Canadian cannabis company, Cronos, and a lot of youth are using e-cigarette devices to vape cannabis.
So people are finding ways of using hard drugs using e-pens, and one of the things I always caution my patients about is to never share a vape at a party because you don't actually know what's in it. You might think it's a nicotine vape, or you might think it's a marijuana vape, and next thing you know, you're high on methamphetamine.
Another part of the scam of e-cigarettes is they're promoted as a quit smoking device. Smokers, including kids, use them to try to quit smoking. But for most people, they actually make it harder to quit smoking.
In my early teens, I started smoking. Everybody was smoking. I didn't want to be left out. I started thinking about not smoking probably in my mid-50s. I got more serious about it in my late 50s. I went directly from no cigarettes to vaping. And I like the vaping with the liquid because I can control the amount of nicotine and I could graduate it down on my terms. I've been on 0 nicotine since September of 2017. So I was able to go from whatever it was, the highest to the lowest and none in that amount of time. Occasionally I still vape with 0 nicotine. I like it. I like it, and I can't think of anything other than I enjoy the act.
Stan Glance's group in California, they did a meta-analysis a couple years ago, and they looked at e-cigarettes and smoking cessation in real world and clinical settings. They looked at about 600 unique records, and this was up until June of 2015. And overall, they found that people were less likely to quit smoking if they used e-cigarettes than if they didn't use e-cigarettes, about 28% lower.
Now, if you talk to the e-cigarette optimists, or even if you listen to the FDA, they talk about that, oh, it would be so much better if people switched from cigarettes to e-cigarettes. And that's mostly based on the fact that you're getting less cancer-causing chemicals. But cancer only kills about 1/3 of the smokers. Most smokers die from heart and lung disease. And the risks of e-cigarettes for those diseases seem to be around that of cigarettes. In fact, the lung disease risks may even be higher. And the reality is about 2/3 of the people who use e-cigarettes, adults who use e-cigarettes, continue to smoke cigarettes at the same time.
When vaping first started becoming a thing, I would do both. I mean, I didn't really have a strong preference one way or the other.
If you use e-cigarettes and continue to smoke cigarettes at the same time, which is what most e-cigarette people do, the risks actually add. So for example, for heart attacks, the risk of smoking cigarettes about doubles to triples the odds of having a heart attack. The risk of using e-cigarettes about doubles the risk of having a heart attack. If you're a dual user, if you're using them both at the same time, the risk goes up by about a factor of 6. So these risks compound. And the same thing has been found for lung disease, that if you're a smoker, you have a certain risk. If you use e-cigarettes, you have a certain risk. If you use both products at the same time, which is what most people do, then those risks compound and you're actually worse off by using the e-cigarettes.
So a new study just came out in the New England Journal, not even a month ago, a randomized trial of e-cigarettes versus nicotine replacement therapy. In the e-cigarette group, at 1 year, 18% had quit smoking. In the nicotine replacement group, almost 9%. People in the e-cigarette group were almost twice as likely to have quit smoking at 1 year. I think there's some good news that they did work for some people. 20% of people who wanted to quit smoking were able to quit smoking using the e-cigarettes. 80% of them were still using them at a year.
Okay. All right, so my group members. Okay. Eva's gonna go first. So Eva's go first.
In this vaping project, the students are gonna create an authentic product and they're gonna work collaboratively in teams to achieve their goal.
All my friends are ruined. You know, it's a teen, from a teen's perspective, and all their friends are vaping and smoking these e-cigarettes, and they don't know what to do about it.
But another important part of this particular project is that it is a real-world problem. It is authentic. It's not just something that is thrown at the students from a textbook. They have to create something. There's innovation, there's creativity.
And then we could be like, all my friends are ruining their lives for that temporary high that can only take them so far till they fall. Yeah, we can
Search, yeah.
search for artificial happiness, which is what we want to name it.
Yes.
What is vaping? Vaping is the process of inhaling a substance such as marijuana, nicotine, tobacco, and more. Companies have been luring in teens and advertising in a way that's appealing and getting them to start vaping, and they're making a lot of money from this. Next up is Audrey.
Okay, so risks of vaping. Vaping, as you can say, they call them pods.
This problem has increased exponentially over the last few years. I speak to a lot of my colleagues that are in larger comprehensive schools. It is everywhere. We don't have any real idea what it's going to do to these students health-wise in the long term.
So what exactly are you inhaling each time you hit your vape? You're inhaling things such as water, chemicals, nicotine, flavoring, heavy metals. There's heavy metals such as nickel and lead, and also plastic in the vapes that you inhale.
So ask yourself this. Do you think at a young age it is acceptable to vape? I personally don't think it is. I want you guys to have a good health, have a good life, and live long. Thank you.
Hit Parade cigarettes for the tobacco, the tip, and the taste you want.
So round, so firm, so fully packed.
Winston tastes good like a cigarette should. Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
It was the cool thing to do back in the 80s.
Vaping is cool.
The cigarette consumption has continued to go down, but the vaping has increased so rapidly that the total product use is up.
I know they don't really know long-term with vaping compared to they do with cigarettes, because cigarettes have been around a lot more. So if there's like a long-term effect, that might probably be bad.
It's really hard for teenagers to quit nicotine, but it can be made easier by having a lot of support. So if you have a supportive friend, a family member, especially a close network of people who are all trying to quit together, that can help. And also there are online resources and apps available so that you don't have to do it alone. And for teenagers especially, I want you to know that you might have to try a lot of times, because nicotine is so addictive. And if you fail once, don't give up. Just keep trying, and eventually you'll kick the habit.
Think about it.
Think about it.
Think about it long term.
Check the facts.
Know the facts.
For your health.
For your health. For your friend's health.
Got it. You're done.
Okay.
Beautiful. Excellent.